If you're like every other human, you don't like long, unproductive meetings. And if you're a church-going human, you've endured your fair share of long, unproductive meetings. In today's video, I'm going to give you 5 easy tips for leading better church meetings. Hi everyone, I'm Pastor Dave and welcome to The Art of Ministry. If you're new to the channel, I make videos about ministry, faith, and the Bible. So be sure to check out my other videos and definitely subscribe to the channel and leave a comment letting me know what else you'd like me to cover in my videos. Now, I'm a Presbyterian pastor and our church board is called a session, but whatever tradition you're a part of and whatever organization you're leading, these 5 tips will help you run better meetings that everyone enjoys, especially you. Tip number 1 is to use an agenda the right way. If you're not using an agenda, you need to start using an agenda. But there's using an agenda and then there's using an agenda. Just having a list of items on a piece of paper is not enough. You need to use the agenda the right way to have a good meeting. This means the agenda should be as complete yet concise as possible. Don't just have vague words or phrases like worship planning or Sunday school curriculum. Use specific language like discussion of whether to have 2 services on Easter Sunday, or motion to approve Sunday school curriculum from a specific company. Also, clearly label each item as a report, a discussion, or a motion, keeping in mind that most discussions in particular will probably result in a motion at some point, so you might as well just list the anticipated motion. Discussions should lead to decisions, which is what a motion represents. If they don't, it's probably just a waste of time. Using an agenda the right way also means that you stick to the agenda and only talk about things that are in the agenda. When something comes up that's not in the agenda, no matter how important, your job as the moderator is to say, that's not on the agenda for this meeting, but we can put it on the next agenda if you want. Usually people will just go along with you, but if someone pushes back and asks why, your response should be something like, because sticking to the agenda protects the session members from being blindsided and from making decisions without enough information and enough time for consideration, which in turn protects the church from bad decisions. Make sure you stick to the agenda no matter what. And the more complete the agenda, the easier that is to do. Tip number 2 is to use a consent agenda. A consent agenda allows the board to approve multiple items without discussion and without individual motions. It's used for routine procedural items that don't involve decision-making. Things like the minutes, committee reports, and even some financial statements can be included in the consent agenda, and it will save you huge amounts of time that you can use for more important discussions and decisions. Now, there are 2 requirements for using a consent agenda properly. First, you need to make sure that everything in it is distributed to the board in plenty of time for them to read it. That way they know what they're voting on. If anyone has a clarifying question, they should ask you or the appropriate board member about it before the meeting. The second requirement is that before asking for a motion to approve the consent agenda, you ask if any board member wants to pull an item for separate discussion and vote later in the meeting. The consent agenda should never be a way of secretly or forcefully pushing something through. It's not like attaching an amendment to a bill in Congress. Any board member has the right to pull an item from the consent agenda for separate discussion and vote. But if nobody does, then you can ask for the motion and approve the consent agenda all at once and save yourself a ton of time. Tip number 3 is to use motions effectively. And the key here is to try and have as many motions as possible come from a committee. That way they don't need a second, and the main discussion has already happened in committee. Boards of small churches and organizations have a tendency to discuss everything as if they are a committee. But you want to resist that and ask committees, even if it's just a committee of 2 or 3 people, to discuss the topic first and bring a motion to the board meeting. That helps the board make a much faster decision and leaves more time for focusing on what a board should be focusing on, like mission and vision and staffing and other big picture stuff. By the way, make sure that if a motion needs supporting materials and information, that you include that in the agenda or another part of the meeting packet. That way you'll have fewer questions about it during the meeting. Tip number 4 is to front load controversial conversations. If you know that a particular discussion is going to be controversial, talk to your board members ahead of time, separately. Give them your undivided attention to answer questions and listen to their concerns. Make them feel heard and understood before the meeting even happens. This does 2 things. First, it makes them more likely to behave during the meeting, and second, it helps you anticipate how the discussion will go and where the points of greatest resistance are likely to be. You're not trying to manipulate the outcome, well, maybe a little. You're just trying to make sure the board can make a hard decision without hurt feelings. Disappointment is inevitable, but dissension can be avoided if you have those conversations beforehand. Tip number 5 is to give everyone a role at or before the meeting. We've all been at meetings where we had nothing to contribute and we went home thinking, I didn't need to be there. Give every board member a role so that they can contribute to the meeting and by extension to the organization. Some positions on the board always have a role, like the treasurer and the secretary, but other members might not always have something to discuss or to vote on from their area, but they can still contribute to the meeting in other ways. They can bring refreshments, they can be in charge of setting up tables and chairs, they can lead times of prayer, and so on. Lately, I've started assigning some of these roles at the end of each meeting so that everyone knows a month in advance how they will be contributing to the next meeting. That way I'm not doing it with short notice and putting someone on the spot and making them uncomfortable. When people have a role to play, they are much more likely to have better attendance and participation in the meetings because they know they are contributing. All right, so those are 5 tips for running better church meetings. Try them out and leave me a comment letting me know how it went. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, ring the bell to turn on notifications, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.